What if the foundation of all human beliefs could be traced back to a single powerful emotion? Fear. Imagine standing at the edge of an unknown world, surrounded by dense forests, untamed wilds, and the constant threat of predators. This was the reality for our ancestors millions of years ago. But what if, beyond mere survival, the very act of being afraid led to something greater, something that would shape the spiritual beliefs of all future generations? The first human ancestors were not equipped with the comforts of modern society. They faced an unpredictable world where every rustling leaf, every shadow, could hide danger. Life was fragile and death was constant. But instead of simply succumbing to this fear, early humans turned it into a powerful tool, a tool that would shape the course of their evolution. The fear of the unknown, of forces beyond their control, may have been the first seed of spirituality. What if this fear was not just a reaction, but the very spark that ignited the human quest for meaning? This is where the story begins. Fear of death, fear of nature's uncontrollable power, and fear of the unseen gave birth to the first inklings of belief. As early humans faced the vast mysteries of their world, they began to seek explanations. They needed something to hold on to, a way to make sense of the world around them, a way to feel less helpless in the face of nature's overwhelming power. Have you ever wondered how our ancestors made sense of the unknown? How they sought to control the uncontrollable? Stay with me as we journey into the past and uncover how the fear that once dominated the human experience eventually gave rise to the first steps of belief systems. Before we dive deeper into how fear shaped the first spiritual practices, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever wondered how fear shapes the way we view the world today? Leave a comment below sharing your experience with fear and belief. Don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying this exploration, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to continue following this fascinating journey into the origins of human spirituality. Fear, an instinct that runs deep in our biology, was not just a survival mechanism for early humans. It was the catalyst for the birth of spiritual thought. Imagine our distant ancestors standing on the precipice of the unknown. Every day they encountered forces they couldn't control, storms that could wipe out their shelter, predators far larger and stronger than themselves, and the ever-looming mystery of death. It was in the face of such immense uncertainty that their responses to fear began to shape the future of human consciousness. From the very beginning, humans had to grapple with their vulnerability. In a world full of dangers, this vulnerability created a profound sense of fear that affected not only their physical survival, but also their understanding of the world. Unlike animals, whose responses to fear might have been purely instinctual, early humans began to develop a deeper level of consciousness. They weren't just running from danger, they were questioning it. They wondered, why does this happen? What causes the storms? Where do we go when we die? These questions weren't just born of curiosity, they were born of fear. The early human mind, conscious of its own fragility, began to search for explanations, often in the form of intangible forces. It wasn't enough to merely avoid danger. They needed to understand it, to give it meaning. The response to fear, then, was not just one of flight or fight. It was the first spark of spirituality. Humans began to imagine and conceptualize supernatural forces that controlled the world. These early concepts of gods and spirits weren't born out of a desire for power or control. They were born out of a desperate need to find comfort in an unpredictable world. As humans continued to face nature's unpredictability, their fear began to take shape in more structured ways. The fear of thunderstorms, for instance, could have easily led to the personification of natural forces as gods, who wielded the power to create or destroy. The fear of predators might have inspired beliefs in protective spirits or ancestors watching over them. Over time, these fears evolved into complex belief systems where the forces of nature were no longer mere random events. They were understood as part of a larger spiritual order. How did this shift from fear to belief happen? How did early humans begin to ritualize their fear, creating systems of worship and reverence around the forces they feared the most? This is where the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and human evolution gets fascinating. Fear became the thread that connected the unknown with the known. And through that connection, our ancestors began to weave the very first fabrics of belief. As you reflect on this, think about the fears we still carry today. How much of our current view of the world is shaped by the same fears that plagued our ancestors? Do we still reach for explanations when faced with the unknown? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think fear has to do with the way we understand spirituality today? Drop a comment below and share your insights. If you're enjoying this exploration, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next step in our journey into the origins of belief. As we explore the origins of human beliefs, one question stands out. Is there a natural connection between fear and spirituality? It's easy to think of fear and spirituality as separate, distinct realms of human experience, but what if they were inextricably linked from the very beginning? From the earliest moments of human existence, fear might have not only been a survival instinct, but also the key that unlocked the door to the spiritual world. Fear, at its core, is a reaction to the unknown, a signal that something is out of our control. Early humans, in their vulnerability to nature's most powerful forces, didn't just react to fear, they processed it. And in that processing, they began to connect the fear they felt to something beyond the immediate physical threat. A thunderstorm, for example, wasn't just something to fear because of its destructive power. It was something that could have been interpreted as the anger of a god or a spirit trying to communicate with them. The unknown forces of nature became part of the spiritual world that early humans believed in, not because they were looking for answers in the way we understand spirituality today, but because fear drove them to understand the unexplainable. When humans are confronted with danger, our brains activate a cascade of responses that prepare us for fight, flight, or freeze. But early humans took this emotional and physiological response a step further. Fear didn't simply trigger a survival instinct, it triggered a search for meaning. The lightning strike that destroyed a tree wasn't just a random occurrence, it was a sign, a message from the divine. The predatory animal lurking at the edge of the forest wasn't just a threat to life, it was an omen, a supernatural presence with which humans could connect. The need to understand and contextualize these forces became the foundation for the first spiritual beliefs. It's easy to see how the evolution of the human brain played a crucial role in this process. As our ancestors' cognitive abilities developed, so did their ability to imagine and interpret abstract concepts. This allowed them to move beyond basic survival responses to seeing deeper meaning in the events around them. Fear, once a purely instinctual reaction, became a bridge to spirituality, a way for humans to make sense of the world beyond the physical. The question arises, did spirituality as a concept exist independently of fear, or did it arise because of fear itself? Many scholars believe that early belief systems were deeply rooted in the desire to explain and mitigate the fears that plagued early humans. Death, destruction, and the unknown were constant sources of anxiety. In a world without the comfort of science or religion as we know it today, spirituality offered a way to confront these fears and find some semblance of control. Through ritual, prayer, and the creation of deities, humans began to craft narratives that soothed their anxieties, offering protection, meaning, and purpose in the face of uncertainty. As we look at this connection between fear and spirituality, it raises an intriguing thought. Is our relationship with fear still a driving force in modern spirituality? Are our own beliefs, whether religious or philosophical, still shaped by the same fundamental fear of the unknown that our ancestors experienced? And how does this connection continue to influence how we interpret the world around us? I'd love to hear your perspective on this connection. Do you think fear was the key to unlocking spirituality, or was it something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this deep dive, give us a like and make sure to subscribe so we can continue unraveling the mysteries of our ancient past together. Death, our greatest mystery and our most primal fear. For early humans, the fear of death was not just an abstract concept but a tangible, life-threatening reality. In a world where survival was uncertain, death was ever present. And it was this constant companion that drove early humans to seek answers. But instead of simply fearing death, early humans began to conceptualize it, to give it meaning. And in doing so, they set the stage for the birth of spiritual thought. When a loved one died, it wasn't just the physical loss that early humans had to contend with, it was the existential crisis that came with it. What happened to the spirit of the person? Where did they go? What was death? The fear of the unknown, of not knowing where a person went after death, would have been a powerful motivator for early humans to develop the first ideas of an afterlife or spiritual existence. Death wasn't just an end. It was a transition, a passage to something beyond. This shift from seeing death as an inevitable physical event to viewing it as part of a larger, spiritual narrative may have been the very beginning of organized belief systems. The concept of an afterlife, one of the oldest and most widespread spiritual ideas, likely arose from this fear of death. Early humans, faced with the terrifying unknown of what happens after death, began to imagine a place or realm where the spirit lived on. This belief wasn't merely a comforting thought, it was a way to cope with the overwhelming fear of mortality. By imagining a life after death, humans could make sense of death's finality. It wasn't just an ending, but a continuation, a belief in some form of existence beyond the physical world. But this wasn't just about comfort. The idea of the afterlife was a response to fear, a way to wrestle with the uncertainty of what lay beyond the grave. It gave humans a way to process the loss of loved ones and to preserve their legacies. The belief in spirits and ancestors likely arose as a direct result of this need to keep the memory of the dead alive, to honor them and ensure their continued presence in the world. Ancestor worship, an early form of spirituality, might have begun as a way to keep the dead close, to keep them engaged in the lives of the living, and to find a sense of continuity between the past, present, and future. These early ideas of the afterlife and ancestor worship were the foundation of more complex spiritual systems. Over time, the simple belief in spirits evolved into the development of gods and divine figures, and with them came organized rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies designed to appease these higher powers. The need to address the fear of death gave rise to the first forms of spiritual practice, where humans sought to find favor with the gods, ensure protection, and gain some assurance of life after death. As we reflect on this, it's fascinating to consider how the fear of death continues to shape our spiritual beliefs today. How many of our modern religious practices still stem from that primal fear of what happens when we die? Is it possible that, like our ancient ancestors, we are still trying to make sense of death and find peace with it in the context of our beliefs? What do you think? How has the fear of death shaped the spiritual beliefs we hold today? Leave your comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this deep connection between fear and belief. And if you're finding this exploration engaging, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay with us as we continue uncovering the roots of human spirituality. Rituals and symbols. These are the threads that weave together the fabric of human spirituality. From the earliest forms of human belief, rituals and symbols have played a central role in connecting the physical and spiritual worlds. But where did they come from? What inspired our ancestors to create these practices and symbols? The answer might be simpler than we think. They were born from the need to control fear and make sense of the unknown. In the face of constant danger and existential uncertainty, early humans needed a way to confront their fears, especially the fear of death and the fear of the unknown. It was through rituals, repetitive actions imbued with meaning, that they began to exert some control over the forces that seemed to govern their lives. Rituals, whether simple or complex, were ways to ensure protection, to honor the gods or spirits, and to align themselves with the forces they believed shaped their world. Early rituals were likely closely tied to the natural world. Think about how our ancestors might have feared natural phenomena like storms, eclipses, or the changing seasons. These events, unpredictable and powerful, could easily have been seen as signs from the gods or messages from the spirits. In response to this fear, early humans would have created rituals to appease these unseen forces, to seek protection, or to ensure good fortune. These rituals were not only a way to address immediate concerns, but also to create a sense of order in an unpredictable world. But rituals alone wouldn't have been enough. To make these practices more meaningful, early humans turned to symbols. A symbol, unlike a ritual, transcends immediate action. It encapsulates an idea, a belief, or a power. Early humans created symbols to represent the forces they feared and revered. A certain animal, for example, might have been seen as a symbol of strength or protection, while a tree or rock might have symbolized the connection between the earthly and spiritual realms. These symbols were more than mere representations. They were imbued with spiritual significance. They served as conduits between the human world and the world of the divine. As time went on, these symbols became more standardized and rituals became more structured. The once personal and individual acts of spirituality transformed into collective practices. The creation of sacred symbols and the performance of rituals became a way to unify communities, to ensure the survival of the group, and to reinforce the shared belief system that was emerging. What began as individual acts of fear and reverence slowly evolved into a cohesive belief system, one that was passed down from generation to generation. These early belief systems were not simply a way of seeking answers. They were a way to create a sense of control in a world that was otherwise unpredictable. Rituals and symbols provided a framework within which early humans could understand their place in the world, confront their deepest fears, and connect with the supernatural forces they believed controlled their lives. The very act of performing rituals and using symbols gave them the illusion of control, something that was desperately needed in a world filled with so much uncertainty. Today, we still use rituals and symbols in many of our spiritual practices. Whether it's the act of lighting a candle, the use of sacred texts, or the creation of religious icons, rituals and symbols continue to be central to our spiritual lives. In fact, many of the rituals we perform today have their roots in these early acts of spirituality created by our ancestors as they sought to make sense of their world. How do you think rituals and symbols have evolved in our own spiritual practices? Do they still serve the same purpose as they did for our early ancestors? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the origins of human spirituality, be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these fascinating connections with us. As early humans began to confront the mysteries of life, death, and the forces of nature, the need for spiritual guidance emerged. This was the dawn of one of the most ancient and enduring roles in human history, the shaman, or spiritual leader. Shamans, often considered intermediaries between the physical world and the spirit world, played a central role in the development of spiritual beliefs. They were the first to guide their communities in understanding and interpreting the supernatural forces that shaped their lives. Shamanism, as a practice, likely emerged in response to the existential fears faced by early humans. In a world where survival was uncertain, where natural disasters or predatory animals could strike at any moment, humans needed someone to provide direction, comfort, and insight. Shamans were not only healers or ritual leaders, they were spiritual guides who offered answers to the most pressing questions of the time. They helped their communities navigate the unknown and offered hope in the face of fear. The role of the shaman was not based on physical strength or prowess. It was rooted in their perceived connection to the spiritual realm. Shamans were believed to possess unique abilities, such as communicating with spirits, interpreting dreams, and seeing beyond the material world. These abilities set them apart from others in their communities and elevated them to a position of great respect and authority. The shaman's role extended far beyond conducting rituals or offering sacrifices. They were also responsible for guiding the tribe through life's most significant moments, birth, death, and everything in between. They performed healing ceremonies, offered counsel during times of crisis, and ensured that the spiritual balance of the community was maintained. By doing so, they provided the community with a sense of stability and continuity in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Shamanic practices were deeply connected to the natural world. Early shamans often went on solitary journeys into the wilderness, seeking visions or spiritual guidance from the forces of nature. They used natural substances, such as plants and herbs, to alter their consciousness and enter spiritual realms. These practices allowed them to communicate with spirits, ancestors, and deities, and in doing so, they gained insights that they could share with their communities. The power of the shaman was not just in their connection to the spiritual world, but in their ability to translate these insights into practical guidance. For early humans, the world was full of unknowns, disease, natural disasters, and threats from wild animals. Shamans offered the tribe not only spiritual explanations, but also practical advice on how to survive. They interpreted omens, offered healing remedies, and performed rituals to protect the community from harm. In this way, they became not just spiritual leaders, but vital figures in the survival and cohesion of early societies. The legacy of shamanism can still be seen in modern spiritual practices. While the role of the shaman has evolved over time, the fundamental principles of shamanic belief remain. Many of today's spiritual leaders, from religious figures to healers, continue to serve as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds, guiding their communities through life's challenges. And the rituals and symbols they use are often rooted in the same traditions that early shamans developed thousands of years ago. As we look at the role of the shaman in the development of spirituality, it raises important questions about the evolution of spiritual leadership. How has the concept of spiritual guidance changed over the millennia? And how much of the shamanic tradition still influences our beliefs today? I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you think shamanism has shaped our understanding of spirituality and the role of spiritual leaders today? Leave a comment below and share your perspective. If you're enjoying this exploration, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to continue following our journey into the origins of human belief systems. One of the most significant ways early humans grappled with their fear and uncertainty was by turning to nature itself. The powerful forces of nature, storms, earthquakes, lightning, and celestial events, were sources of awe and terror. To early humans, these forces were not mere natural occurrences. They were divine supernatural powers that governed their lives. Fear and reverence of these forces likely played a central role in the development of early spiritual beliefs, as humans sought to understand and influence the natural world through their rituals and spiritual practices. Nature was unpredictable, and its vastness was beyond human comprehension. A lightning strike could obliterate a tree, a volcanic eruption could destroy entire landscapes, and a predator could strike without warning. In the face of such uncontrollable power, early humans didn't just fear these forces, they revered them. The fear of nature's power was closely linked to the belief that these forces were not random. They were controlled by deities, spirits, or other supernatural beings. By understanding and appeasing these forces, early humans hoped to gain some control over their environment. This reverence for natural forces gave rise to the first concepts of gods and spirits. Early humans believed that the elements, earth, wind, fire, and water, were inhabited by powerful beings. These beings were often personified as gods, each responsible for a particular aspect of nature. The god of the sun, the goddess of the moon, the spirit of the wind, all of these represented forces beyond human control, forces that needed to be respected and, at times, appeased. The connection between fear and reverence is key here. Fear was the initial response to nature's unpredictable power, but it soon transformed into reverence. Early humans didn't just fear these forces. They sought to understand them, to interact with them, and in some cases to appease them through ritual. The rain wasn't just a phenomenon to avoid. It was a gift from the rain god, a blessing that could ensure a good harvest. Thunderstorms weren't just terrifying, they were the voice of the gods, a sign that needed to be interpreted by the community's spiritual leaders. This deep connection to nature became the foundation for many of the world's earliest spiritual practices. The seasons, the movements of the stars, the cycles of the moon, these natural phenomena were seen as expressions of divine will. Early humans used these patterns to guide their lives, organizing their rituals around the changing seasons, the positions of the stars, and the phases of the moon. The reverence for natural forces was not just a form of spirituality. It was a way to create order out of chaos, to impose some sense of control over an unpredictable world. As humanity developed more complex belief systems, these early ideas about nature and its divine forces were expanded. The gods became more elaborate and more specific, governing not only natural forces, but also aspects of human life, such as love, war, and death. Yet, even in the most complex religious systems, the roots of these beliefs were in the early human experience of fear and reverence for nature's power. Today, we still see echoes of this reverence for nature in many modern, spiritual practices. From the veneration of nature spirits in indigenous cultures to the rituals that celebrate the changing seasons in various religious traditions, the belief that nature is imbued with spiritual significance continues to be an important aspect of human spirituality. The idea that natural forces are not just physical but spiritual is still very much alive in many cultures around the world. How do you think our reverence for nature has evolved over time? Do we still carry the same fears and reverence for the natural world that our ancestors did? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this connection between fear, reverence, and nature's power. Leave a comment below, and let's continue the conversation. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the origins of human spirituality, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to stay updated on our journey. The human imagination has always been drawn to the unknown. What existed before the world as we know it? How did the universe come into being? These are questions that have fascinated humanity for millennia. But what if the answers to these profound mysteries are rooted in our primal fear of the unknown? Creation myths, the stories that explain the origins of the universe and life itself, may have been born not just from curiosity, but from the deepest fears of our ancestors. In the earliest stages of human thought, fear of the unknown likely played a central role in shaping creation myths. Imagine early humans faced with the vastness of the sky, the depths of the ocean, and the endless expanse of the wilderness. These were places filled with danger and mystery, places where the rules of survival were not immediately clear. The fear of these unknown realms likely led our ancestors to create stories that explained how the world came into being and what lay beyond the physical world. Creation myths were an attempt to make sense of the chaos of the universe. Early humans couldn't fathom the true nature of the cosmos, so they created stories, narratives that gave shape and meaning to the incomprehensible. These myths served as a way to explain the origin of the world, the forces that shaped it, and the role of humanity within it. But at their core, these myths were driven by a desire to control fear. By creating a narrative, our ancestors gave themselves a sense of understanding and power over the things that frightened them. One of the most common elements of creation myths is the presence of a divine being or force that shapes the universe. Whether it's a god, a spirit, or some other powerful entity, these beings are often portrayed as having control over the chaos of creation. In many myths, the world begins in a state of disorder or darkness, and it is through the actions of a divine force that the world is brought into being. This transformation from chaos to order reflects the human need to find control in a world that is often unpredictable and terrifying. But creation myths were not just about explaining the origins of the world, they were about making the unknown known. They were a way for early humans to confront their fears about the cosmos and their place within it. By creating stories of gods who shaped the earth, the sky, and the seas, humans were able to personify the forces they feared and give them meaning. The fear of the unknown became a driving force for creation myths as humanity sought to impose order and understanding on the vast, unknowable universe. Interestingly, creation myths often share similar themes, regardless of the culture. The idea of a chaotic, primordial world being shaped into order by a divine force appears in many different traditions. Whether it's the biblical creation story, the Greek myth of Gaia and Uranus, or the ancient Egyptian myth of Atum, the central idea is the same. From chaos comes order, and from the unknown comes creation. These shared themes suggest that the fear of the unknown and the desire to understand the origins of the world is a universal human experience. In our modern world, we continue to grapple with the unknown. Science has answered many of the questions that once sparked creation myths, but there are still mysteries that elude our understanding. The fear of the unknown is no longer just about explaining the origins of the world. It's about exploring the cosmos, understanding the nature of consciousness, and searching for meaning in a vast and often incomprehensible universe. Just as our ancestors created myths to explain what they couldn't understand, we continue to seek answers to the questions that lie beyond our grasp. How do you think the fear of the unknown continues to shape our beliefs today? Do we still create myths, both religious and scientific, to make sense of the world around us? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your perspective. If you're enjoying this exploration into the roots of human spirituality, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to stay tuned for more in-depth content. As early humans confronted the mysteries of the world around them, their deep-seated fears led them to create the first gods, divine figures that controlled the forces of nature, life, and death. These gods weren't born out of a desire for power or control. They were born out of the primal need to explain and cope with the overwhelming uncertainties that defined early human existence. Fear of nature's fury, fear of the unknown, and fear of death all contributed to the creation of divine beings that could be appeased, worshipped, and revered. The first gods were not abstract concepts or omnipotent figures as we think of them today. They were personifications of the forces that early humans feared the most. The sun, the moon, the earth, the sea. Each of these elements represented a powerful force that humans had to respect, navigate, and at times placate. These gods were often seen as capricious and unpredictable, much like the forces of nature they represented. Thunderstorms could come without warning, floods could devastate crops, and wild animals could strike at any moment. In the face of such danger, early humans turned to the gods for protection, guidance, and understanding. These divine figures were more than just symbols of nature. They were seen as active participants in human affairs. Gods were not distant, untouchable beings. They were beings that could be invoked, appeased, or even angered. Early rituals were created to honor these gods, to seek their favor, and to ensure protection for the community. Sacrifices, prayers, and offerings became a way to interact with these divine figures, to establish a relationship with them, and to ensure that the gods would intervene in favor of the people. The development of gods also marked the beginning of organized religion. As humans began to understand their relationship with the divine, they created structures, temples, shrines, and sacred places where rituals could be performed and the gods could be worshipped. The first religious leaders, often the same shamans who had guided the community through fear and uncertainty, became intermediaries between the gods and the people. They performed rituals, interpreted signs from the gods, and helped the community navigate their relationship with the divine. But gods weren't just representations of fear. They were also embodiments of hope. The belief that gods controlled the natural world offered early humans a sense of security in an otherwise chaotic existence. If the gods could be appeased, if the right rituals and sacrifices were made, then the forces of nature could be controlled. The gods became figures of both reverence and fear, but also figures of hope, offering the possibility of protection, blessing, and guidance. The creation of gods was a fundamental shift in human thought. It marked the transition from seeing nature as a series of random, uncontrollable events to understanding nature as a system governed by powerful, divine beings. This shift gave humans a sense of agency, a way to interact with the world around them, and in doing so, it laid the groundwork for the development of complex religious systems that would shape human societies for millennia. Today, the idea of gods continues to be a central element of many spiritual traditions. Whether it's the gods of ancient Greece, the deities of Hinduism, or the God of Christianity, the divine figures created by early humans have had a profound impact on the development of religious thought and practice. The fear that gave rise to the first gods still echoes in the spiritual practices of millions of people today. How do you think the fear of natural forces continues to shape our understanding of divinity today? Do you see echoes of these ancient gods in our modern spiritual practices? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're finding this exploration of early belief systems insightful, Don't forget to give a like and subscribe to continue this journey into the origins of human spirituality. As we look back at the origins of human spirituality, it's impossible to ignore the profound impact that fear had on shaping the beliefs and practices of our ancestors. From the earliest rituals and symbols to the creation of gods and organized religions, fear was the driving force behind humanity's search for meaning in an unpredictable and often terrifying world. But what about today? How much of this legacy of fear continues to shape modern spirituality? In many ways, the fear of the unknown still plays a central role in how we approach spiritual questions. Whether it's the fear of death, the fear of the future, or the fear of forces beyond our control, these deep-seated anxieties continue to drive much of our spiritual seeking. The rituals, symbols, and belief systems that began with our ancestors still echo in modern religions, offering a sense of comfort, protection, and understanding in the face of life's uncertainties. Take, for example, the way many people turn to prayer, meditation, or spiritual practices when faced with difficult situations. These practices, much like the rituals of our ancestors, are an attempt to connect with something greater than ourselves, to find meaning in times of fear and uncertainty. Whether it's a prayer for protection, a ritual to bring good fortune, or a belief in an afterlife, these spiritual practices offer a sense of control over the uncontrollable, just as the early rituals did. But fear isn't the only legacy that remains. The desire for comfort, understanding, and connection, core aspects of our ancestors' spiritual lives, continues to shape our beliefs today. In many ways, spirituality is still about finding peace in the midst of fear, understanding our place in the world, and seeking guidance from forces greater than ourselves. The gods and spirits created by early humans may have been personifications of nature's power, but the spiritual essence they represented lives on in the ways we seek meaning and purpose today. As we move further into the modern world, the nature of our fears has changed, but the underlying human need to confront them has remained. Today, we may not fear thunderstorms or wild animals, but we fear other things: loss, failure, uncertainty, and the unknown future. Spirituality, in its many forms, continues to provide a framework for us to face these fears and to seek meaning in a world that often feels just as unpredictable as it did for our distant ancestors. If you've made it this far, you've joined me on a fascinating journey into the roots of human spirituality, and I'm so glad we've explored these deep connections between fear, belief, and the divine. Now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about the legacy of fear in spirituality? Do you see any connections between ancient beliefs and modern spiritual practices? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this exploration, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join me in the next video, where we'll continue diving into the fascinating world of ancient beliefs and their impact on modern spirituality. There's so much more to uncover, and I can't wait to share it with you.